when it comes to wanting to do things like take somebody's life or to justify enslaving or marginalizing a group of people, one thing that people often do is they dehumanize them. We see that in cases of like the wars. Like we'll look at some of the world wars, World War One, World War Two, and you take people like the Germans. They were called Krauts and Jerrys instead of Germans. The Japanese were called Japs and Nips. The Vietnamese in the Vietnam War were called Charlie and Gook. And the Americans were called by their enemy things like Joe and Yankee. These are things that made it easier to kill them when you're in the midst of a war. Sometimes you need to do anything you can to do something that's maybe very difficult for you to do, is take a life of somebody else. And then we look at society, and we've seen things, especially here in America, with the issues we have with race. When you have like white people who are called things like cracker and honky, and we're all too familiar with blacks being called the N-word and compared to things like monkeys and apes and things of that nature. It's led to the enslavement of them, to of enslavement of blacks, and it's led to the, all the social injustice that people are complaining about and upset with, and things that have plagued American society since its founding. Then we look at simple biblical history, and we look at the way Jesus was talked about. We see in John chapter 10 verse 20, Jesus was basically called a demon and that he was insane. In Matthew chapter 10 verse 25, Jesus said that he was called Beelzebub, which basically means that, it's another name for Satan, or that he was the prince of evil. And then in Luke chapter 7 verse 34, he was called a glutton and a winebibber. These are things that allowed those who didn't believe in him to kill him, marginalize him, and even kill and marginalize his followers that we've seen throughout biblical history, and even to this day with the persecution that happens among Christians. But then one other way that you don't really think about but is very prevalent is in the issue, albeit very difficult issue for many to talk about, very hot button, is the issue of abortion. As of the time I'm making this video, there's like 43 million babies have been killed this year in 2023 via abortion worldwide. 43 million. What do you hear in the debate of abortion? What do you often hear? When you want a baby, it's called a baby. But when a woman doesn't want a baby, it's called a fetus, an embryo, a blob of tissue. These are terms that are used to dehumanize it in order to take away its life, make it easier to take its life. Although, as a side note, an embryo by definition is a word for a young one, something that grows, a fruit of the womb. And a fetus is another word for the young, or something that the young while they're in the womb, or childbearing, a pregnancy, or offspring. So actually these words, while they're used to dehumanize, are actually words that humanize it if they're given in their proper context. But for those who don't want to call it a baby or human life, they try to dehumanize it by using these words in a context that they're not supposed to be used in, or a definition that's not supposed to be used. But I say all that to come to Matthew 15 verses 18 and 19, where Jesus says, "But what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart, and this defiles a person. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witnesses, slander." You see, it says that out of the mouth proceeds from the heart. And the first sin they talk about is murder. And that's what we've been talking about, murdering people, in whether it's like Jesus or babies in abortion, or killing people, which isn't exactly murder, but killing people in war and things of that nature. Although murder does happen in war, obviously. But when it comes from the heart, and too often we feel that we have to, when it comes to society, we say, how many laws do we have to put in place to regulate somebody's behavior? Because although we have law after law after law, and we come up with more laws every day to modify somebody's behavior, we still have crimes. Obviously, the moral debate with things like abortion, we have laws in place that actually have allowed it to happen, to take innocent baby's life. And it was legal to carry slaves at one point, illegal to discriminate against black people. So I mean, it's the law isn't necessarily the answer, and sometimes it's the proponent, it's the reason for the problems. And then you look at from a religious point of view, how many laws like sacraments, Mosaic law, commandments, even the commandments of Jesus and the commandments we find in the Bible, do we have to put in place to try to stop people from sinning? And they don't realize that all that happens is that there's more sin being created. It's not stopping anything. It's not helping. But people think if we get more laws or we try harder to obey them, then we'll clean ourselves up. We'll stop sinning. Or in society, if we put enough laws, we'll stop sin and stop crime and stop evil from happening. And it just doesn't work. In fact, people end up creating laws, like I said, or even churches that end up teaching things that promote crime, promote sin, promote evil. It doesn't help. But yet we still think that that's the only way to stop it. But what did Jesus say? It said, but what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart. There's no law you can put in place that's going to change somebody's heart, excuse me. There's no law you can put in place that's going to change somebody's heart. But yet we still try. And then when people try to say, well, it's only through an encounter with the living God, through faith in Jesus Christ, that changes the heart. It's true. But those who want to rely on law don't believe it's true. There's no God. That's not true. That's not going to change. They think that you have to force somebody from the outside to get them to change. But when you change somebody's heart from the inside, their behavior will change. That's why scripture talks about love is the fulfillment of the law, and that Christians are not under the law. Why? Because now we're under the guidance and reliance of our God. And he's not going to lead us into sin. He's not going to lead us to kill and murder and destroy, and definitely not take life, much less the baby's life in the womb. So why don't people want to do this? It's because people don't want to have accountability to a God. They think that if we just try hard enough, put enough laws in place, eliminate enough behaviors or eliminate enough people that say things and do things we don't want to do, that society will be fine. And society is just a mess. And that's why people don't need laws to change their heart. Or change their behavior. They need a God that changes their heart. And that's only available when you become alive to God through faith in Jesus Christ. That's what this is all about. Jesus said it himself, because out of the heart comes evil thoughts. Well, you put the opposite of evil in the heart, which is God. Put the good of God in your heart, and he loves you the way you're meant to be loved. You're not going to be murdering and committing adultery and involved in sexual immorality. And that is all we try to do with laws. Try to modify people's behavior so they're not murdering, they're not committing adultery, they're not involved in sexual immorality, they're not stealing, they're not bearing false witness, they're not slandering anybody. But that's all you see going on in the world today, really. Despite all the laws, despite everything we talk about, that's all you see going on, because people's hearts are dead to God. They're spiritually dead in their sins, and they need the life of God, which only comes through faith in Jesus Christ. Keep telling people about Jesus, because once he changes their heart, everything we try to get as a fruit of that through laws will come naturally as we trust and depend on our God. Have a good day.